My mother convinced my boyfriend to be with my sister instead of me. Years later, I invited them to. The moment I realized I was second best in my own family was not when my mother forgot my college graduation, nor when she framed only Chloe's awards in the hallway. It wasn't even when she introduced us to strangers as my daughter, Chloe National Merit Scholar, and debate champion, and Jane. No. The realization struck with brutal clarity the day I overheard my mother's voice drifting from our sun-drenched kitchen, speaking to Kyle, my boyfriend of 3 years, in that persuasive tone she usually reserved for fundraising calls. "Kyle, you're practically family already. But I've been watching you and Jane together, and I have to be honest, you deserve more." I froze mid-step in the hallway, my hand hovering over the kitchen doorknob. Kyle had come over early for our weekend hike, something we'd done every Saturday for the past 2 years. "Mrs. Pearson, I don't understand," Kyle replied, confusion evident in his voice. My mother's laugh, that light, tinkling sound that accompanied her most devastating insights, made my stomach clench. "Oh, I think you do. You're a man with ambition, with drive. Jane is comfortable, safe. She'll never challenge you." I gripped the wall beside me, suddenly dizzy. Through the crack in the door, I could see Kyle sitting at our kitchen island, his dark hair still slightly damp from his morning shower, his expression troubled. My mother leaned against the counter opposite him, elegant even in casual clothes, her gaze calculatingly kind. "I love Jane," Kyle said, but something in his tone sent ice through my veins. "Of course you do, darling. We all love Jane. But love isn't always enough. Is it not for someone like you?" She reached across the island to touch his arm. "You should be with someone who matches your potential. Someone who shines as brightly as you do. Someone like Chloe," Kyle stated rather than asked, his voice so quiet I almost missed it. My heart stopped. Chloe, my sister, 2 years younger, Yale law graduate, effortlessly beautiful in a way I'd never managed despite our similar features. The golden daughter, the perfect one. "Chloe has always admired you," my mother continued, her voice honey-sweet. "And you two would make a magnificent pair, both headed for greatness, both deserving of the very best." I didn't wait to hear Kyle's response. I backed away from the door silently, my hiking boots clutched forgotten in my trembling hands. That evening, Kyle called and asked to meet at our spot, a small gazebo in Robertson Park, where we'd had our first date. I arrived early, sitting on the weathered bench, watching sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink that seemed cruelly beautiful given the circumstances. When Kyle appeared, hands shoved deep in his pockets and guilt shadowing his usually confident features, I knew what was coming. "Jane," he began, sitting beside me but leaving a careful distance between us. "We need to talk." A bitter laugh escaped me. "About you and Chloe." His head snapped up, surprise and shame flashing across his face. "You know, I heard you and my mother this morning," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I didn't hear your answer, though." Kyle looked away, staring at the distant trees as if they might offer salvation. "Your mother made some points that I've been thinking about for a while," he admitted, each word driving deeper into my heart. "About Chloe being better for you." "Jane, it's not that simple." "Actually, it is," I interrupted. "Do you want to be with my sister instead of me, yes or no?" The silence stretched between us, filling with the chirping of birds and distant laughter from children playing nearby. When Kyle finally spoke, his voice was soft with apology, but firm with decision. "Yes, I think I do." He turned to face me, his familiar brown eyes pleading for understanding. "There's always been something between us, Chloe and me. Even when I was falling for you, I tried to ignore it because you and I made sense, but I'm not enough." I finished for him, surprising myself with my calm. "I'm not ambitious enough or accomplished enough or beautiful enough." "That's not fair," Kyle protested weakly. "Isn't it, though?" I stood, needing to put physical distance between us. "My mother has been comparing us our entire lives, and Chloe always wins, always, and now you're doing the same calculation and coming to the same conclusion." Kyle stood too, reaching for my hand, but I stepped back. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you will anyway." I blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears fall. Was any of it real? Did you ever love me? Or was I just available until something better came along? Of course I loved you. I still care for you deeply, Kyle said. But the words rang hollow. It's just, you love her more, I finished. Or you think you could? His silence was confirmation enough. 3 days later, I submitted my resignation letter at the local accounting firm where I'd worked since graduating. Within a week, I had packed my modest apartment and booked a one-way ticket to New York. I left without attending the dinner my mother insisted on hosting, to talk things through as a family, unable to bear the sight of Kyle and Chloe together, likely already making plans for the future my mother had orchestrated for them. The only goodbye I received was from my father, who met me at the airport, his weathered face lined with sorrow. Unlike my mother, he had always treated Chloe and me equally, though his voice had never been loud enough to counterbalance her influence. "I'm sorry, Janie," he said, using the childhood nickname that now felt like it belonged to a different person entirely. "This isn't right." "I need to go, Dad," I replied, hugging him tightly. "I can't stay and watch this happen." He pressed an envelope into my hands. "A little extra to help you settle. Call when you're ready." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and boarded the plane without looking back. New York greeted me with indifferent bustle, a stark contrast to the tight-knit community I'd left behind in Mapleton. My savings and my father's gift afforded me 2 months in a shoebox apartment in Queens while I searched for work. The financial crisis had made accounting jobs scarce, especially for someone with limited experience from a small Midwestern firm. After the 6th rejection, I found myself sitting in a coffee shop near Wall Street, scrolling through job listings with increasing desperation. The place was packed, every table occupied by professionals tapping on laptops or engaged in intense conversations about markets and investments. "Mind if I share everywhere else is full?" I looked up to find a man in his early 30s standing beside my table, holding a cup of black coffee and a worn leather portfolio. His dark curly hair was slightly windblown, and his blue eyes were bright with intelligence behind tortoiseshell glasses. "Sure," I gestured to the empty chair. "Asher Novak," he introduced himself, settling across from me. "Thanks for the rescue. This place is a madhouse at lunch." "Jane Pearson," I replied, "and I'm starting to think all of New York is a madhouse, all the time." He laughed, the sound genuine and warm. "New arrival. Is it that obvious? You still look hopeful when you scroll through job listings," he said, nodding toward my laptop. "Dead giveaway, despite myself." I smiled. 6 weeks and counting. I'm starting to think my accounting degree isn't worth the paper it's printed on. Asher took a sip of his coffee, studying me with interest. "Accounting what kind?" "Financial, corporate. I worked for a small firm in Ohio for 3 years, but New York employers seem unimpressed." He set down his cup. "Would you be interested in something a little different? My firm is looking for someone with accounting background, but for sustainable investment analysis." I raised an eyebrow. Sustainable investment, green tech, ethical business practices, companies making positive social impact. Asher explained, his expression animated. "The finances are trickier to analyze than traditional investments, but the returns, both monetary and ethical, can be substantial." Intrigued, despite my skepticism, I found myself asking, "And what's the name of this firm?" "Novak and Associates," he grinned. "Well, currently just Novak. I founded it 6 months ago, and I'm looking to expand." "You're offering me a job at your startup after a 5-minute conversation in a coffee shop." "I'm offering you an interview," he corrected, reaching into his portfolio and pulling out a business card. "But my instincts are usually good. There's something about you grounded but hungry. That's exactly what this industry needs more of." 3 days later, I walked into Asher's modest office in a converted warehouse space in Brooklyn. The interview lasted 3 hours, during which he challenged every assumption I had about financial analysis and investment, pushing me to think beyond traditional metrics of success. By the end, I was mentally exhausted, but more intellectually stimulated than I'd felt in years. When he offered me the position of financial analyst with a salary that matched what I'd been making in Ohio, I accepted on the spot. "Welcome to the revolution," he said with a grin, shaking my hand. "Fair warning, we're going to change the world, and it's going to be a lot of work." He wasn't exaggerating. The next 6 months were a blur of 18-hour days, crashing courses in sustainable business practices, and weekends spent hunched over spreadsheets in Asher's loft apartment because we'd been priced out of additional office space. We won our first major client, a renewable energy startup in need of investment structuring 3 months in, and celebrated with takeout dumplings on Asher's rooftop. To Jane Pearson, Asher toasted, raising a paper cup of cheap champagne, who identified the tax credit opportunity that sealed the deal. I clinked my cup against his, warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the champagne. To Novak and Associates, who took a chance on a desperate Ohioan in a coffee shop, under the starlit Brooklyn sky, with the Manhattan skyline glittering across the river. I realized I hadn't thought about Kyle or Chloe or my mother in weeks. The constant ache of betrayal had faded, replaced by the satisfying fatigue of meaningful work and the unexpected joy of true partnership. 3 years passed in a whirlwind of growth. Novak and Associates became Novak and Pearson Sustainable Investments, with offices in Manhattan and a staff of 12. Our client list expanded from scrappy startups to established corporations looking to transition toward more sustainable practices. And our reputation for rigorous analysis paired with innovative approaches earned us features in financial publications. My relationship with Asher evolved as organically as our business, shifting from colleagues to friends to something deeper with such natural progression that I couldn't pinpoint when exactly I fell in love with him. Perhaps it was during our first major crisis, when a client's CEO was implicated in a scandal and Asher refused to abandon the company's workers by pulling our investment. Maybe it was during the countless late nights when we ordered Thai food and debated financial models until dawn. Or maybe it was the day he looked at me across our conference table and said, "You know, Pearson, you're the smartest person I've ever met," with such genuine admiration that it healed something broken inside me. Unlike Kyle, who had always treated my intelligence as a pleasant surprise, Asher expected brilliance from me and celebrated when I exceeded even those high expectations. He pushed me to present at conferences, to publish articles on sustainable finance, to claim space in an industry still dominated by men who underestimated women like me. Unlike Kyle, who had always treated my intelligence as a pleasant surprise, Asher expected brilliance from me and celebrated when I exceeded even those high expectations. He pushed me to present at conferences, to publish articles on sustainable finance, to claim space in an industry still dominated by men who underestimated women like me. Our first kiss happened after we secured a $20 million investment fund focused on women-led clean energy initiatives, my brainchild that Asher had championed tirelessly. We were the last ones in the office, surrounded by empty champagne bottles from the team celebration. "We did it," I said, still dazed by the success. "You did it," Asher corrected, looking at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You know that, right? This was all you." Before I could deflect the praise as I'd been conditioned to do my entire life, he had crossed the room and taken my face in his hands. "Jane Pearson, you are extraordinary," he whispered, and then he kissed me as if he'd been waiting years to do so. Later that night, tangled in his sheets, I told him everything about Kyle, Chloe, my mother, the betrayal I'd fled from and tried to forget. Asher listened without interruption, his arms tightening around me when my voice broke. "Their loss," he said simply when I finished. "The greatest loss they'll never fully understand." 6 months later, we moved into a brownstone in Park Slope, blending our personal and professional lives with the same thoughtful intentionality that characterized our business decisions. Unlike my previous relationship, where I had often felt I needed to diminish myself to be acceptable, with Asher, I found myself expanding, growing into spaces I hadn't known existed within me. On my 30th birthday, Asher proposed with a vintage emerald ring. "Not a diamond," he explained, sliding it onto my finger. "They're traditional but environmentally problematic, Emeralds are about growth and wisdom, much more you. I said yes without hesitation, secure in the knowledge that this man saw me, truly saw me, and chose me precisely because of who I was, not despite it. We married in a small ceremony on the High Line, surrounded by greenery and the few close friends who had become our chosen family. My father came alone, telling me with sad eyes that my mother and Chloe sent their regrets but couldn't attend due to prior commitments. Are they happy? I asked him during our dance. The first time I'd allowed myself to inquire about them in 5 years. They pretend to be, he answered carefully. Kyle made partner at his firm. Chloe finished law school. Your mother got the perfect wedding she always wanted for her. He hesitated, then added, but no, Janie, I don't think they're happy. I nodded, feeling neither satisfaction nor regret, just a distant acknowledgement of a life no longer connected to mine. I nodded, feeling neither satisfaction nor regret, just a distant acknowledgement of a life no longer connected to mine. Life continued to expand in beautiful ways. Novak and Pearson became a leader in sustainable finance, with offices in London and Singapore in addition to our New York headquarters. Asher and I welcomed twins, Mia and Leo, whose arrival transformed our brownstone from a space of orderly sophistication to cheerful chaos. At 34, I published my first book on ethical investment strategies, which became required reading in several MBA programs. I maintained minimal contact with my family holiday cards, occasional calls with my father, sterile email exchanges with my mother. The distance served as protection, allowing me to preserve the self I had rebuilt from the ashes of their betrayal. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday in October, an email from my father disrupted the careful separation I had maintained. Jane, I hope this finds you and your family well. I've been following your success from afar. Your mother doesn't know I subscribe to Financial Weekly just to see your name in print. I'm so proud of you, though I know that means little given how things happened. I'm writing because things here are difficult. Chloe and Kyle's law firm is failing. They overextended, took on too much debt for their new offices, and now they're facing bankruptcy. Your mother is beside herself, as you can imagine. Her perfect plan didn't account for poor business decisions. I'm not asking you to help them financially or otherwise. I just thought you should know. Sometimes life has a way of balancing scales, though I wish it hadn't come at such a cost to your sister. All my love, Dad. I stared at the screen, emotions churning. Part of me, a small, wounded part I wasn't proud of, felt vindicated. My mother had engineered what she believed would be the perfect match, destroying my relationship in the process, only for it to end in financial ruin. But the larger part of me just felt tired of carrying the weight of their rejection, tired of the barriers I had built to protect myself. That evening, I showed the email to Asher as we sat on our back patio, watching the twins play in the garden. What are you thinking? He asked after reading it. I sighed, leaning into his solid presence beside me. I'm thinking that I spent so many years trying to prove them wrong, to prove that I was worth choosing, worth loving. And now that they're struggling, I don't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. Because you've moved beyond needing their validation, Asher observed. You've built a life that's authentically yours. I nodded slowly. But there's still something unresolved, a conversation we never had, a goodbye I never properly said. I nodded slowly. But there's still something unresolved, a conversation we never had, a goodbye I never properly said. Asher considered this, his fingers laced with mine. The Whitney Museum Gala is next month, he said finally. We're being honored for the Women in Sustainability Fund. You could invite them. Invite them to see me receive an award. I raised an eyebrow. Isn't that a bit petty? Not as an I told you so, as closure, as a way to show them, and maybe more importantly, yourself, that you've created something meaningful that has nothing to do with their approval or disapproval. I thought about it, imagining my mother, Chloe, and Kyle witnessing the life I had built, my successful business, my respected voice in the industry, my partnership with Asher that was everything my relationship with Kyle never could have been. Not to gloat, but to finally close a chapter that had been left painfully open. I'll think about it, I said. The next morning, I sent the invitations, The Whitney Museum's grand hall sparkled with understated elegance. Art from female artists adorned the walls, hand-selected to complement the evening's theme of women's empowerment in business. As a major sponsor of the event, Novak and Pearson had a prominent table near the stage, where later in the evening Asher and I would be presented with an award for our Women in Sustainability Fund, which had directed over $100 million to female-led green enterprises in just 3 years. I adjusted the collar of my emerald green jumpsuit, a creation from one of our fund's beneficiaries, a sustainable fashion designer whose zero-waste techniques had revolutionized the industry. Beside me, Asher looked handsome in his tailored suit, his hand resting comfortably at the small of my back as we greeted colleagues and friends. "They're here," he murmured discreetly, nodding toward the entrance. I turned to see my mother, Chloe, and Kyle being checked against the guest list. They looked exactly as I remembered, yet somehow diminished. My mother's carefully maintained appearance couldn't hide the new lines around her mouth. Chloe's designer dress appeared slightly dated, as if pulled from the back of her closet rather than newly purchased. Kyle's smile seemed fixed, professional rather than genuine. "Are you ready?" Asher asked, his voice warm with support. I took a deep breath. "Yes, I think I've been ready for a long time." We approached them as they stood awkwardly near the entrance, clearly out of place among New York's financial and artistic elite. "Mother." I greeted her with composure I'd practiced for weeks. "Chloe, Kyle, thank you for coming." My mother's eyes widened slightly, taking in my appearance, the confidence in my stance. The obvious respect directed my way as guests, and staff nodded acknowledgement as they passed. "Jane," she said, her voice betraying surprise despite her attempt at nonchalance. "You look, well." "This is quite an event," Chloe added, her gaze darting around the room, landing briefly on Asher before returning to me. She looked uncomfortable in a way I'd never seen before Chloe, who had always moved through the world with the easy confidence of the perpetually favored. "This is my husband, Asher Novak," I said, allowing myself to enjoy the flash of recognition in Kyle's eyes. Our firm's name had become well known enough that even in Ohio, they would have heard of it. "A pleasure to finally meet Jane's family," Asher said smoothly, shaking their hands with perfect professionalism. "We've prepared a table for you. The ceremony will begin in about an hour." As we guided them to their seats, I felt my mother's eyes on me, cataloging details in the way she always had. Except now I no longer feared her assessment. I had nothing to prove to her. "Your father mentioned you have children," she asked as we settled them at their table. Strategically placed with a perfect view of the stage but not close enough for extended interaction. "Twins, Mia and Leo. They're 4, I replied, showing her a photo on my phone out of common courtesy rather than any desire for approval. "They look like Asher," Chloe observed, a hint of her old competitiveness seeping through. "They have his curls," I agreed easily, "and my stubborn streak." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only when Kyle asked Asher about our firm's recent expansion into Asian markets. I excused myself to greet other guests, leaving Asher to handle the conversation with his characteristic charm and intelligence. Throughout the evening, I was aware of their eyes following me, watching as industry leaders greeted me with genuine respect, as the museum director personally thanked me for our firm's contributions to arts education, as Asher and I moved through the room as equal partners in every sense. When the time came for our award presentation, I took the stage beside Asher, facing the audience with the confidence that comes from knowing your own worth. 5 years ago, Novak and Pearson created the Women in Sustainability Fund with a simple premise, I began. That when we invest in women who are investing in our planet's future, everybody wins. As I spoke about the women we had funded, the businesses they had built, the environmental challenges they had tackled, I caught my mother's gaze from across the room. For the first time in my memory, she was looking at me not with criticism or comparison, but with something that might have been respect. Later, as the evening wound down, they approached me near the bar where I was having a quiet moment to myself. "Congratulations," Kyle said, awkwardness evident in his stiff posture. "Your work is impressive." "Thank you," I replied simply. "We should have dinner while we're in town," my mother suggested. "Catch up properly." I regarded her steadily. I don't think so, Mother, not this trip. Her face fell slightly. Jane, I know things between us are complicated, but seeing you tonight, seeing what you've accomplished. She hesitated, seemingly struggling to find words that had never come easily to her. I may have been wrong. About you. You were, I agreed, not unkindly. But that's not why I invited you tonight. Why did you, then? Chloe asked, a hint of the old resentment in her tone. I considered my answer carefully. Because for years, I carried the weight of not being enough in your eyes. Tonight wasn't about showing you that I became successful despite that. It was about showing myself that what you think, what any of you think, no longer defines my worth. Kyle had the grace to look ashamed. Jane, what happened between us was a long time ago, I finished for him. And led me here. To a life that's exactly right for me, so in a strange way. I should thank you all. My mother's eyes widened in surprise. You're welcome. The uncertainty in her voice, so unlike her usual confident pronouncements, almost made me smile. Dad tells me your firm is struggling, I said, turning to Kyle and Chloe. They exchanged uncomfortable glances. The economy in Ohio has been difficult, Kyle began, but Chloe interrupted him. We're filing for bankruptcy next month, she admitted, her voice brittle. We overextended. I nodded, neither gloating nor offering sympathy. I have colleagues who specialize in helping businesses restructure. I can put you in touch if you'd like. I nodded, neither gloating nor offering sympathy. I have colleagues who specialize in helping businesses restructure. I can put you in touch if you'd like. The offer hung between us, professional courtesy extended without emotional attachment. After a moment, Kyle nodded. We'd appreciate that. I'll have my assistant send the information. I glanced across the room, where Asher was watching me with quiet support in his eyes. Now if you'll excuse me, my husband is waiting. As I walked away, my mother called after me. Jane, will we see you again? I turned back, regarding the three people who had once held the power to break my heart. Maybe, on my terms, when I'm ready. Without waiting for a response, I crossed the room to where Asher stood, slipping my hand into his. How do you feel? He asked, pressing a kiss to my temple. I leaned into his warmth, watching as my mother, sister, and Kyle made their way toward the exit, smaller somehow than when they had arrived. Complete, I answered truthfully, like I finally put down a weight I didn't realize I was still carrying. Later that night, in the quiet of our brownstone, with the twins asleep and the city lights glimmering through our windows, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. How the moment that once seemed like the end of my world had actually been the beginning of a better one. How being deemed not enough had pushed me to discover just how much I truly contained. No regrets, Asher asked, joining me on our window seat, 2 glasses of wine in hand. I accepted the glass. Thinking of the faces I had seen tonight, my mother's belated recognition, Chloe's poorly concealed envy, Kyle's regret, none of it mattered now. Not really. They had shaped my past but held no power over my future. Not a single one, I answered, clinking my glass against his. Every step led me here. Outside, New York continued its ceaseless movement, a city of reinvention and second chances. Inside, I was finally, completely at peace with my own worth, a worth that had always existed, waiting only for me to recognize it myself.